Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shvi'is Perek Ches Halacha Ches, concluding the 8th chapter and beginning Perek Tes Halacha Aleph. We're learning today Daf Samach Tes. We left off on Daf Samach Ches Amid Beis, 3 lines before the bottom of the Amid by the brackets Loi Oymar Lochem Ma V'chulei. We're dedicating today's class in the merit of all of the Yidden that live in Eretz Yisrael, in merit of all of the IDF soldiers, in merit of all of the Yidden that live all around the world. Hashem will give us a total victory. Amen. So let's go like this. First of all, we are going back to the second case in the Mishnah. Now that the Mishnah said that Rabbi Akiva made a comment, Benegeya, our dinim, that what Rabbi Eliezer says, you have it wrong. But I will not tell you what he said. Me'inyan le'inyan, the Mishnah says Rabbi Akiva made such other statement. He made one more such statement, and that is regarding that the Chachamim had a tradition that Rabbi Eliezer said that ha'oichel pas kuti is ka'oichel psar chazir. In other words, the issue is not only a rabbinic one. The issue is that since, according to that tradition, there is a likelihood that the produce, that the grain themselves, which have to be tithed, were not. Tevel is an Isur Doiraisa. Don't consider the problem there only to be an issue of Midrabanan, which actually we learned a few daf ago from the many Takonis Rabbanan. When it came to bread, people were more lenient. And even in halacha, we are more lenient. No, it's worse. It's a suffix doiraisa. It's koichel b'sar chazir. And here again, Rabbi Akiva says that's not what he says, but I won't tell you what he said. Unlike the prior case in where we had two versions, either lekula or lechumra, here we're going to have only a very lenient shita of Rabbi Eliezer concerning pas kuti, as we will see. That will be at the end of Daf Samach Amud Beis. We're going to learn the final, the Gemara will take apart the detail in the Mishnah that if someone warmed up food by using kash or teven of shviz, then whatever that heat is used for, in the case of the Mishnah, the food, it's mutter to have benefit from. Or if it's a bath, you can take a bath there. Then the Mishnah says that a person who's chashuv should be machmer on himself. So we're going to have some more details about that. We will also have some halachas regarding avodah zarah, mishamshei avodah zarah. Some of what we will learn today, we learned in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, and with that, we will conclude the 8th chapter. We're beginning today the 9th chapter. Guys, remember, there's only 2 more chapters left afterwards, the 9th and the 10th. The 9th is speaking both about Sfichim and about the halachas of Biur, Zman Biur, that we never spoke out in detail. And the 10th chapter is a complete new topic, which is Shmitas Ksafim, which is very relevant. I know nowadays we make a prusbul. That will be the final topic of the 10th chapter. Now, when it comes to Sfichim, I want to review a few things. First of all, remember, you have to know when there is a plant, whether it's grain, whether it's legumes, whether it's vegetables, not everything that is readied on the 7th year is a product of the 7th year. Just remember these general dinim. When it comes to grains and many legumes, it really has to do with when did it reach a shlish. If it reached a shlish in the 6th year, it's a product of the 6th year. You have to remember that. When it comes to some legumes, we even say it goes bashar hashrasha. When it comes to vegetables, generally, it has to do with the year that in which it was picked. But again, we also learned to Tosfos that if something was so ready that at some point, even if it's not actually picked, the fact that it could be picked, even though by Yerakos it's basar likutoi isurai, we will consider it from when it was completely ready. In other words, we're speaking about Sfichim of the 7th year. We also quoted before, we even read that Asherilio or Torres Kahanim, that there was a Machlokes Tanoim. We don't find this in Mishnayos, we find this in the Medrash, that Rabbi Akiva says Sfichim is Asur Doiraisa. Chachamim hold Sfichim is Asur Midrabanan, so paskins the Rambam. The source of that will be the Mishnah that we'll learn in the beginning of the 9th chapter. The reason behind it is that since a person might plant a vegetable or a legume or a grain and say it grew on its own, that there was such a possibility, so therefore the Chachamim says that anything that grows on its own, that's not residual, not a fruit, something that needs to grow, it needs to be planted to grow, grows once and you harvest it and that's that, midrabanan, it may not be eaten. Nevertheless, sfichim that grow in the wild, sfichim that are not cultivated, on that there is no such isur derabanan because there's no chashash. No one plants them. And that will really be the opening topic of the Mishnah. The Mishnah is going to enumerate many products that grow in the wild. The Mishnah is going to speak about them. Aleph, Benigeya Dine Truma Sumaisris. Guys, Truma Sumaisris, the topic of the next two Masechtas, only applies to a product that's nishmar, that belongs to someone, that's not hefker. Things that grow in the wild generally are hefker. So we're going to speak a little bit about how they are exempt of Maisris, and also they are not included in the dinim, in the Isur Derabanan that we're going to go with Sfichim. But let me just speak about a couple of other details. First of all, any balabas that does not allow his field to be open to the public, if a balabas protects his field, no one is allowed to purchase any product from such a field. However, these legumes that the Mishnah will enumerate that grow without cultivation, they're not included in that problem because no one protects them. Okay, that's number one. Another detail, even when you have someone who does not protect their field, it's an unprotected field. And even when we're speaking about sfichim that are allowed to be picked, one more thing I have to speak out, that if the seller is an am ha'aretz, the buyer can only buy a very small amount. What's pshat a small amount? That the money that he will be paying is money from which you cannot buy more than 3 meals, because we are concerned that the am ha'aretz who's receiving this money, even though the sale was permitted, nevertheless it is the mei shvius. The mei shvius has to be used for food. It certainly may not be put in the bank to be saved for after, to be saved. So when you buy a small amount, the presumption is that the money will be used for food. Once you make a larger purchase, there is a fear, if the seller is an am ha'aretz, that he won't treat the money as he should. He will put it away, and therefore you're being misayeh lo oivrei avera. These details will be connected to our Mishnah. And finally, the Mishnah that enumerates various plants, some of them were not clear to Chazal what they meant. And we're going to have a Gemara here, very similar to Bavli Rosh Hashanah Chavav, but not the same, in which when they wanted to find out what certain words mean in the Mishnah, sometimes they would speak to workers, servants in the house of Rabbi. That we learned from the conversation of servants of the house of Rabbi, the meaning of various words in the Mishnah. We actually learned certain halachas that Chachamim could not come to. It's amazing. And that came all from a casual conversation. Al derech, we find in the Torah that from, that Yafasi Chasan Shal Avdei Yavos, that the Torah writes in so many details, the whole story of Eliezer Eved Avram. And when it comes to Hilchas Shabbos, there's so little written, that there's a certain chashivus, and there's something special about a conversation, not only of a tzaddik, a conversation of people that are servants in the household of a tzaddik, that even from that, there's a lot that could be learned. That will be the daf today. Let's begin, Chevra, on daf Samach Ches Amid Beis, again by the bracket. Going me'inyan le'inyan, where else did Rabbi Akiva say that you have it wrong? And that is, ha'oichel pas kuti, we thought that Rabbi Eliezer holds, is ha'oichel psar chazir. Says Rabbi Akiva, that's not what he says, but I will not tell you what he said. So now the Gemara wants to know, but what did he say? So Rabbi Chizkiya b'shem Rabbi Acham, that he was here, everyone, he was very lenient. Mater hoya Rabbi Eliezer, chametz and shol kutim la'achar Pesach miyad. It's amazing. You have to put these two things together. And I wanted, the Gabbai hit it on the head yesterday. So guys, remember, a kuti, there's a machloikis from way back, Hanoim, whether kutim, who converted under duress, whether we consider their conversion, at the end of the day, they're Yidden or the Goyim. That's very relevant. Now, when you say that they have an issue of pas palter, you're saying that they have a din of a Goy. Okay, many hold they have a din of a Goy. At some point, everyone considered them to be like Goyim, once we found out that they're serving Avodah Zarah. But the question is, and Danny asked it, 1 second, if they're Goyim, they don't have to tithe anything. So why are you telling me psar chazir? No, there's a doiraisa problem, that their grain might not be tithed. It might be tevel doiraisa, yeah? No, Rabbi Eliezer held taka der goyim. How do we know that Rabbi Eliezer held der goyim? He didn't say that explicitly, but what he said is that you can buy their chametz right after Pesach. Very simple. And we all know that if a Jew owns chametz over Pesach, chametz she'avru alav Pesach may not be consumed. And let's go back to the Kutim. Everyone knew that the Kutim misunderstood because they reject Torah Shebal Peh, the Lifnei Iver Loisiten Michshel. So even if they were from the little groups of the Kutim that were keeping the mitzvahs for themselves, but they would have no problem selling chametz she'avru alav Pesach to a Jew for a Jew. They wouldn't care. If you would hold that Kutim are Yidin, then we would have to be careful and we would not be allowed to buy chametz products from them right after Pesach. We would have to wait until we know for sure that whatever they might have owned over Pesach, they already sold or ate up. The fact, so first of all, we see Beferish, Rabbi Eliezer allowed for Jews to buy chametz from Kutim right after Pesach is a raya that Rabbi Eliezer holds that Kutim have a din of goyim. That's number one. What the Gemara doesn't speak out, but it's implied, Rabbi Eliezer, since he holds the Har Goyim, holds that their produce doesn't have to be tithed. Like the Tanoim that hold that Goyim that have ownership in the land of Israel, unfortunately, their ownership removes the Kedusha to a certain degree, and that which grows in their property, Bechlal, doesn't have to be tithed. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva was certain that Rabbi Eliezer considered Pas Kutim like Pas Palter, not to minimize the Isser of Pas Palter. On the other hand, there are Heterim for Pas Palter. But he definitely did not say it's Ka'oiche Psar Chazir. There is no D'oraisa Dike issue. It's almost like, in other words, that implies that the Chachamim that hold, that Rabbi Eliezer said, Ha'oichel Pas Kuti, Ka'oichel Psar Chazir, let's go different. They held that there is no Isur D'Rabbanan. It's an Isur D'oraisa. Kutim Yidin. So it's not an issue of Pas Palter, but we don't trust their kashrus, especially when they sell it to others. So that's the machlokes, whether they're Jews or whether they're goyim. And Rabbi Eliezer, who held that they were goyim, dinam ken din goyim, therefore will ironically hold that it's less problematic, not more problematic. Gewaldik. And now let's move on to Daf Samachtes. So the Mishnah said that if you have a bathhouse that was warmed up with kash or tevin of shvis, even though kash or tevin should have been given for animals to eat. So that was a mistake that they made. Nevertheless, says the Mishnah, that a person is allowed to bathe in it, unless you're chashuv. Okay. Says the Gemara. Hadod de teimar. Be'ilen dum sayam. Now, there are two very different ways of learning the Gemara. We're going to begin with the Pnei Moshe, and then we're going to read the Rashidilio legamre different. But he teaches it that Dumsaya is bathhouses. That this that you say regarding bathhouses is only public bathhouses. But and there we say that if a person is not chashuv, he can take a bath. The adam chashuv should not go. Aber beram be'ilein pirivata. Privata is private. And the way some interpret, we'll see different in the Rashi in a moment, that those bathhouses that were exclusive means that they were primarily frequented by chashuva people. It was a bathhouse used by chashuva people. There, even if you are not chashuv, you're not allowed to go there. Usher. Why? Because the observer doesn't know if you are chashuv or not. If he's going to see someone using the bathhouse, if that bathhouse was warmed up with kash or and tevin of shvis, then the same issue that an adam chashuv has is that he has to behave beyond the letter of the law because people are looking at him. People might learn from him, even though he's not doing anything wrong. But people say that if he's doing that, I can do something even less than that. In other words, we hold an Adam Chashuv to a higher standard, and that's okay. So the Gemara says a chiddush that if a bathhouse is known to be used by people that are Chashuv, even a non-Chashuv is not allowed to go there. No, that's one pshat. And I want to read the other pshat completely different in the Rashi. You'll look on the top of the right column. So he teaches that Dumsaya doesn't mean a public bathhouse. No, he says, when was the Mishnah matter for you to use a bathhouse that was warmed up, kash tevin of shvius? That's only if the bathhouse is getting waters that are naturally warm anyways. And the adding of the kash and the tevin was to make it even warmer. So since it was anyways hot, that's why you're allowed to use it. Whole different shot. Look inside. Pirush Baruch, that the musa'os means mayim sheyotzim min karka. Chamin, like chami teveri. However, and now he teaches that privata means not a private. It means the bathhouses that we have. It's not being fed by naturally hot springs. Privata asur merchatzois da alma. That all of the warmth of the water comes because it was humanly heated. You're not allowed to do that. That's what the Gemara is saying. So Mishum Hacha, I'm reading in that Asherilio. Ki shorinon. When does the Mishnah allow you by the letter of the law to use it? That's merchashutz kabatav in the shvius. Hainu kishamayim shaloch chamin ma'atzman. Elo. So why do you need to have teven akash? That shemachamimim oisa yoiser.
So why are you telling me? Why are you telling me chamim ma'atzman? They're not at the requested temperature. At the end of the day, we still use the kash for warming up.
I'll give you a good example, right? When there's so many dinim we have like this that if what we did in a problematic way is not essential, we tolerate it, right? You know, all of these lights that open up automatically, motion detectors. So I don't want to do it. So, but it's psik reisha. It's very difficult. So one of the hetenim is that without the light you would be able to walk. But if you're walking down, these staircases in some of these newer buildings that they have no natural light coming in there, it's pitch dark mamish. That's the only light is the light that you open up the door to the staircase. That's problematic. Why? Because even though that's not your intention, it's psikreisha denichala. You want it, you need it. Many times you have this in Allah. That means if you would have been able to take a bath without it, even though the kash and tevin made it even warmer. So therefore we say that, we explained yesterday in the Mishnah that the kash and tevin was an isur. But now that you're using the water, the isur is not even here anymore. It's something that happened later. It's not direct, it's indirect. All of these things, says the Gemara, no, if the only heat came from it, we're not allowed to do it. Anyways, that's a whole different way of learning the Gemara, which is amazing. Back in the Gemara. Now, imis chashufu, said the Mishnah, but if the person is an adam chashuv, harei zeh lo yirchatz, he should not do that. Now, the Mishnah uses the words of an adam chashuv. You have different expressions of people that are beyond the ish pashut. And that is something called an adam shal tsura. Ve'im chaya adam shal tsura, around 11 lines in the top of the Pnei Moshe, koloimer shenireh kechashuv. A man of stature means he looks like an Adam Chashuv. Nevertheless, back in the Gemara. And what will be the example of that? The point is, it's more about the impression that you will give to others. A person cannot say that between me and God, I'm not an Adam Chashuv. You can't say that for this. If others see you like an Adam Chashuv, then they're going to say, if you can bathe in a bathhouse that was warmed, the Kasha Tavan of Shvias, I can even use it to warm it up. People are going to take it down a notch. And the proof is, which is amazing, from Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, guys, we know Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, the greatness of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, right? What was a Ksua stuff, Ayin Zion. He went into Shamayim, he stole the knife. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, if he's not an Adam Chashuv, the point of Gemara is not that he's not an Adam Chashuv. The point is that the problem of the Adam Chashuv is that people know who he is. Which would mean in the reverse that even if you are the greatest tzaddik, but if no one knows who you are, then al pidin, you're allowed to do it. Rabbi Shua ben Levi used to go from Lud. Everyone knew him in Lud. And he would go to another city called Beis Gavrin. Begin Mischei, he would go there to bathe. So he needed to bathe. Al pi halacha, there's no problem. Eloma, the problem is that Adam Chashuv shouldn't do it. So the solution is go to it. If there is a city nearby or far enough away where no one knows who you are, then you can go. And in reverse, therefore, if you look like an Adam, certain people, no matter where they go, when you look at them, they look like an Adam Chashuv, which is scary. Because that's the way it is. There was a Rav that came to LA. He was doing conversions over here. He mamish looked like someone very special. And when I saw what he was doing, I called up a couple of shluchim So someone told me, oh no, he's a clown in the Shmoyne Begadim. They already knew him. And the problem is that people don't see that. A guy with a beautiful Hadras Panim with a big white beard. So that's even, you have to be more careful. And the Gemara says the following story, that Rab Shimon ben Lakish was in Boitzra. By the way, we learned about Rab Shimon ben Lakish in Boitzra before. Remember that? Getting a rough to go there. Okay. Chamson bizalfen lahadam af roititi. So here's the thing. Now, Ingen, guys. In Masechtas Avodah Zarah, we learned that a person is allowed to bathe in a bathhouse even though there is a statue of an Avodah Zarah there. Not that people are worshiping it, because it was not uncommon for people to put getchkalach in bathhouses. We don't view the bathhouse as a base Avodah Zarah, which would make everything in there as tashmishay Avodah Zarah. That's something that's clear. But that's if people are not worshiping it. He went into a bathhouse in Basra, and what he saw is that people are pouring. There was an image of an Avodah Zarah that's called Aphrodite, some Greek goddess, and he saw people worshiping it. They worshipped it by pouring wine for it. Now that's more problematic. So Amaloin. So when he saw that people goyim that were there are worshiping this Avodah Zarah, he felt, that's a problem, and everything should be a problem. So he asked them, Leis Asir, now is it not forbidden to bathe here? He put a question mark. They told him no, that it's okay, and they waited for him to resolve it. So he went also Charlotte Rabbi Yechanan. He went to Rabbi Yechanan. Amalei Rabbi Yechanan b'shem Rabbi Shimon ben Yoitzadak. A gavaldike thing that it's not permitted, it's not prohibited, it's not usher to bathe there, because there is a rule. In the words of the Bavli, the words are Ein Adam Oiser Davar She'ena Shaloi. The words of the Yerushalmi is Ein Davar Shal Rabim Asr. In other words, since the bathhouse belongs to the Rabbim, an individual cannot mess it up. Doesn't have that koyach. So Me'ingen Le'ingen, talking about bathing, we mentioned over here, again, more hetadim concerning bathing. Gavaldik. And on that we say, Hadan and Allah Klal Gadol, and God willing, we are starting, like we said, the second to last chapter in Masechta Shvis. It's going to speak about Svichim. It's going to speak about the Zman of Biur and more pratim in Biur Shvis. We already spoke out. There's machloikas between the Ramban and the Rambam and many others, each one taking a side. Le Ramban, Biur does not mean you have to destroy it. Not like Biur Chametz. Biur means you have to take it out of your house and declare it Hefkin. And even after that, we have a Machloikis Tanoim that we quoted in the beginning of the Masechta, Rabbi Huda, Rabbi Yosi. Maybe even Ashidim can take it back, the owner himself. The Rambam understands Biur means you have to take it out of your house and you have to destroy it. Eloma, Bisman HaBiur, everyone can take Mazain, Shalosh, Su'udois, and that will be an encouragement for people to call their chavedim. Why should it get destroyed? And everyone should partake to make sure that all of the food is consumed. We'll get back to that soon when we learn this inside our sugya. But we begin, like we mentioned, with Svichim. But now that we're going to speak about Svichim, we're going to go with the approach Svichim is Asamid Rabbana. And the reason is because people might plant it, bemaze it, and say that it happened by itself. And therefore, on those wild vegetables and legumes that generally are not planted, there is no Isser. Taka no Isser. And every time we keep on learning about Tzvichem, about people buying vegetables, we're speaking about wild vegetables, not garden vegetables, as we'll see. But now the Mishnah will begin by speaking a broader halacha, and that will be the halacha of Trumas U'Maisers. So the Mishnah will begin with certain types of plants that grow in the wild, and that will be ha-ribuzin ha-shoitin. So if ribuzin means asparagus, so shoitim, asparagus, shoitim always means wild. Not like for a human being a shoita. A person is a shoita because they were not properly cultivated, probably. So it grew in the wild. And now the word chalug loigois, whatever it means, will be one of the reasons that Chazal needed to hear from the workers, the servants in the house of Rabbi, the zeburis of the house of Rabbi, to know what it means. They didn't know what it means. What's the word in the Mishnah? Kuzbar shebaharim. Kuzbar is coriander. Here again, there is regular coriander, Regular coriander is cultivated. Mountain coriander is like wild coriander. River karpas, whatever the karpas means, not garden karpas. No, it's all of these things. It doesn't mean it won't grow in a private field. It could be, but these things, they are very cheap. Without any effort, they grow. They grow in the wild. Even if it grows in my field, I don't care that much about it. So dinam kehefker, turning to daf samach tesamid beis, another product which is shell afar, that's called meadow rocket. Kavan, I don't know where Kavan is with all of your pictures. I thought you'll be very busy by now. All of these, rule number one is they are exempt from Meiser. And Chavra, let's get used to the terms of Chazal. Exempt from Meiser doesn't only mean Meiser. It's a generic word for Trumais and Meisers. They don't have to be tight. Why? Look inside the top Mara folder, Daf Samach Tesamid Beis. B'chol Shana, before we come to Shviz. Why? Lefi she'ein kayoytze behem nishmar. Even if they grew in my field, these are products that people don't need to guard. They grow in the wild. V'havalei min ha'hefker. And therefore, something that has a halachic status of hefker is exempt from Meisres. Now let's come back to our world of Shviz. V'nilkachem mikol adam b'shviz. They can be bought mikol adam. Whenever the Mishnah says mikol adam, it means even from a am haaretz. She'ein kayoytze behem nishmar. Before we get to Svichem, two things, like we mentioned, two things. Number one, if a person protects their field on Shvi'is, no one can buy product from them. You need to normally know, was the owner protecting his field or not protecting his field? Did they lock the gate? Did they leave the gate open? An item that is considered hefker, which are the items that the Mishnah mentioned, is automatically not guarded. And therefore, the problem of you, how can you buy it? Do you know whether the owner left the field open? These products you can buy. Because the owner doesn't mind if people take it. They're never nishma. Now, once we mentioned this, there was another Torah that is good to be spoken out in the intro. And who speaks about it? Everyone speaks about it. Let's go into Pnei Moshe. Another detail. The other detail is that even though the Mishnah mentions you can buy mikol adam, which means even from an ama aretz, zos to wissen sein that there are restrictions to that. That whatever you could buy from an ama aretz, or b'chlal, let's not speak about these crazy products. Let's speak about a product that people normally plant, right? But a fruit. But if the field is not nishmar, if it's hefker, even though you're not allowed to do schayda with peidah shvius, but there's a certain amount that you could sell. But if the owner is an am haaretz, the buyer cannot buy more than mazon shalosh seudas. I just want to read it out over here. Look inside the third line from the top in the Pnei Moshe. V'nilkachem mikol adam b'shvius, v'afilu mishan am haaretz. What's the chiddush? So there's two things. Number one, like we said, shekol shara peiros. When it comes to other fruits, ein loikchen oisem am haaretz, unless you know that this am haaretz left his field mufkar, unprotected, you can't buy it because you have to have a chashash shema min ameshumar hein. Avalelu, but only the ones that the Mishnah mentioned, since sheches koskan min hefker, which is why they're exempt from meiser. So by shvius loikchen mehen. Now another detail, like we said, v'dafke b'dimei mazon gimel seudas lovad. I'm allowed to buy it. I don't have a problem of nishmar, but I can't give the owner more than money for 3 meals. Because of the rule, he might guard it, he might buy a shirt with it, he won't use it only for food. Another detail says the Pnei Moshe. Which means if we know that this guy is doing if we know for sure that he's mishamer peiros v'moichron, ein loikchen mimenu davar sheyesh olav zika shvius klal. If it's connected to the shvius year, can't buy anything from him. This is a comprehensive Pnei Moshe. Okay, now let's come back to the Mishnah. And the Mishnah has to address something which is akasha. What the Mishnah is speaking about items that are svichim. Obviously, otu berishi askinan. The Mishnah was everything that was mentioned here are not fruits. They're not fruits. They're legumes. They're vegetables. Well, it wasn't planted. Okay, you're not allowed to plant it. It grew on its own, but you can't have it. So here we're going to have actually a three-way machloikas tanoim regarding limitations regarding svichim. Rabbi Yehuda says that svichei chardol mutarin. Rabbi Yehuda holds all plants are included in the isur of svichim. I'm going to get clear. All plants. The only plant that's excluded from isur svichim, because it's only for that plant do we say that the owner won't plant it and say that it happened by itself. That's the cheapest, that which is the most readily available, that which does not need effort to plant. And what will that be? Mustard seeds. Only for that do we say, which, by the way, we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda, but this is where we see in the Mishnah that the reason for Isur Svichim is because we were choished that an Oiver Aveda will plant and say it grew by itself. So since that was the reason, they lachatchila never made it on Chardel, according to Rabbi Yehuda. Mitzat Sheni, another Shita, again that we do not paskin by, but it's min hakotza el hakotza. Rab Shimon Oimer, the opposite. Who says this? If not only does he argue with Rabbi Akiva that there's no Isur Doiraisa, he really limits the Isur Derabanan. He says there is only one plan for which the Chachamim says it's Asur to do Svichim. And it has nothing to do with whether it's readily available or not. Again, the whole chashash is someone is going to plant it and will claim that it grew in the wild. There's only one plant that whether you planted it, which means you cultivated it, or whether it grew in the wild, it mamish looks the same. The Rab Shimon says all other legumes and vegetables, they don't look the same. Now, maybe for a city boy, for us, they look the same. But they don't look the same if you know what you're looking at. So what's the chashash? You do it b'mezid and you'll say that it happened by itself. People will see. They'll catch you on your lie. So Rabbi Shimon therefore holds, kol ha-svicha mutarim. The only exception is sviche kruv, cabbage. Why? The only vegetable, like we mentioned, that whether it was cultivated or not cultivated, whether it was planted or whether it grew as an aftergrowth, it looks exactly identical as cabbage. That is where Chazal say, midrabanan, you can't have it. If it's a...
If it's only cabbage?
And yeah, and now the final view, and that's the halacha.
They can sell, no problem, anytime.
No, we didn't say sell anytime because you have many other dinner.
There's not here that applies to
Sure they do. Sure they do. Danny, everyone should hear. One second. First of all, there's two things I have to remember. Our Mishnah is dafka not following Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is not even mentioned in the Mishnah. Rabbeinu HaKadosh did not even write the Shita. We know it from Toras Kahanim that we quoted. We just read the Rashi a few days ago. Maybe it was this week still, or last week. We are following Chacham Mitzasam Midrabanan. Where do we have this Isur Derabanan quoted? This is ground zero. In other words, it's implied from the words both of Rabbi Yehuda that mustard seeds are readily available, and from Rab Shimon that they look alike. They both are understanding that the Isur Derabanan is based on someone doing something wrong and claiming that they did nothing wrong. And the Chachamim hold Kol Asvichim Asurim. And by the way, even mustard. But the Chachamim agree. I want to go back to the whole beginning of the Mishnah. If not, the whole Mishnah doesn't make sense. That items that the items that were mentioned in the ratio of the Mishnah, lechachamim, wild svichim, not garden svichim, are muter. That's the difference. That's it. That's the Mishnah.
So just to summarize again, the first set of items, the wild asparagus and all these things, those are
Lakula alma, they're going to be mutter. That's the way the Rebbe formulated the Mishnah. The Mishnah did not begin addressing svichim. The Mishnah began addressing meiser, trumas or meisers, whether you have to be ma'aser them. And the Mishnah began addressing that since these items are normally minahefker, I don't have to know if the owner left his field unprotected. I can presume that this was left unprotected. Like the Pnei Moshe says, if I know the owner kept it protected, everything changes. But now we have to ask another kasha. Everything. How can you b'chal buy them at tzvichim? So now the Mishnah says, you're right. The chachamim say tzvichim are asurim, and the halach is like the chachamim. But even the chachamim, they don't exclude that which grows in the wild. If it grew in your garden, then it's going to be asur. It's very clear. Okay. Now the Mishnah gave.
Oh, sorry.
Yes.
There's so many different kinds of cabbage. So I mean, it's not one kind. There's so many. How could they make this comment?
The best answer I can give is that many cabbages have a shem levai. That means it has another. Put that picture back up, even in the English. Yeah, I was right. White cabbage, black cabbage, this cabbage, that cabbage, Persian cabbage. If there'll be any left, Persian roasted cabbage. Here, cabbage stam is mustama only one. That's the best I can tell you. Okay. Now, the Mishnah said the words chalug logois. One of the items the Mishnah mentioned. So the Gemara begins quoting now. I think, unless it's out there, that our doir, maybe we can do that. We should make a compilation of all of the stories that you have in the Babli and the Yerushalmi, put it side by side, and see how similar and dissimilar they are, and that's fascinating. We have this in Rosh Hashanah, Chavav Amid Beis, and I want to go more than that. That for people who are using the art scroll, I would like to learn the Gemara inside in a moment, because it's more elaborate. And it makes a difference. And I should have brought. I thought for some reason we're not going to have enough time. I should have brought a Gemara Rosh Hashanah, and I'm going to tell you by heart what I remember from Rosh Hashanah Daf Chavav and Beis to see what happened. But let's begin. So the Mishnah began giving names of vegetables. Okay, hapegam v'haribuzin, but the wild ones. Hashoitim. So says Rab Chagai that the word seirugin. I'm going with how we have it over here. Where do we have the word seirugin? So the Rash Elio reminds us that in Megillah, the Mishnah says that if you read the Megillah seirugin, you're yoitza. In modern Hebrew, what's seirugin? Intermittently. But they didn't know it then. Yakir, what's seirugin in the Holy Tongue?
Seirugin is Seirugin is one. Yeah, skipping. Why skipping?
Okay, very good. So Seirugin it's called intermittently. Doesn't mean to skip. In here, it means you don't read it in one go. You read, you stop. You read, you stop. There's pauses. It's broken up. Not lemafreya. If you read the Megillah lemafreya, you're not yoytze. Seirugin, you're yoytze. And they weren't certain. See, I asked our dear Kohen who speaks Hebrew, Mama Lashon. And seirugin is not one of those words. So when they learned in the Mishnah the word seirugin, and when they learn our Mishnah, the chalug logois, they are exempt of maises. You can buy them even from the Amoritz. The cheskas on that they were not nishmar, v'chulei. And then there was a third din, and this third din is not related. This third din that we're reading right now is not in Bavli Rosh Hashanah. This is why I have no idea, but you can open up a whole topic on this. What was their question? Their question was, Mi Gadol, who is to be given honor? Who is the Gadol? The one who has more chachma or the one who has more years? So when two chachamim are coming to a door and they are about to enter, Rabbi Vosner and Rabbi Koppelman, who should go first? So how do you determine that? The chacham, the one who's more chacham, or the one who is older? Which value is greater? There's a certain wisdom that you only get with age. And therefore, now I'm reading, guys, go over. I want to read our gears. Like I know there's different gears.
Like Sinai and the Purim.
Very good. Danny is saying the end of exactly the siyum over there. Sinai or Harim. But that's a different type of chacham. That's right, Rabbi. That's a different type of chacham.
Now, if you're older, you have more.
I love dafka. Depends on your memory. Okay, so now he says like this. You know what? It's rachart lechavraya. The chavra didn't know. These were three things they didn't know. So Amran, they said that nesoik v'nishal le'elan the beis Rabbi. Who would know? So it looks like that Rebbe was not alive anymore. But since the servants that worked in the household, since they had a connection to Rabbeinu HaKadosh, they would know. Now, I want to read the story the way it's written inside, not on the art scroll. Okay, so Salkon, Mishoel, they went to ask. The Yotza Shivcha Mishal Beis Rebbe. Now, when you ask, so there's a say that you're going to, Rebbe was very wealthy, so they came to his estate. So they rang the bell, they knocked on the door. Who came out to greet them, Ashivcha? The Amr Olahem, she tells him, oh, she saw a bunch of Chavre from the yeshiva. She says, Ikonsu. But she says, how Lishonim? In other words, from the way she greeted them, she automatically already answered one of their questions. A Shivcha Beis Rebbe. No, she saw a bunch of Chachamim. She understood that they might wonder who should go in first. So she says, guys, enter, but the older should enter first. She right away said that Shanim, not the Chacham should enter first. The Shanim should enter first. How great is that? Now, inside the Girsa that for some reason, the Ois Vahadar adopted to be authentic, it was like, actually, the same thing. I'm take it back. It's the same thing. And because of that, because of the Shivcha, so she automatically resolved the first. So Amrin, so they said, okay, Yale plan kadmoy. Now they knew how they should enter. And by the way, when it comes to Shanim, it's much easier than when it comes to Chachma. Because when it comes to Chachma, how are you to determine who's the bigger Chacham? I have no idea. But when it comes to your passport years, I'm a Chaya. Okay, so first of all, that was automatically resolved. Then now there was a lot of people. So they didn't want to barge into the house. So they decided as etiquette, everyone rushing in there. I don't know who they were expecting to ask. The Shifcha already answered question number one. They should have asked that Shifcha everything else, but they entered the house. So the Gemara says that Shurain, Ololin, Kitin. That the rest of them began to enter Kitin. Kitin means instead of barging all in, few people entered, they stopped, they paused. There was an intermittent entrance. Amar Lahain, and she didn't understand why they're doing that. Like, don't make such a big fuss about us. So the fact that she said this shivcha, why are you going in Sirugin, Amachaya? Now they know what Sirugin is. Sirugin means intermittent. Doing, stopping. Daf's ayin. Alternate. Alternating is not a good word because alternating means like when I'm washing Negelwasser, this hand and that hand. It's not alternating. It's just you pause. So the Mishnah says if you read the Megillah L'Sirugin, if you went in order, you're good. Now, again, before they asked anything, Chad Rebbe, one of the Chachamim, have a toin par pechinaya. Now, I would have no idea what but this par pechinaya is the chalug loigos. And he was carrying it in his igulsa, in his kerchief. We spoke about, I had that experience, that my Rebbe is in Chayder. The kerchief was a multi-purpose everything. If they sneezed, the kerchief. If the coffee spilled, it was the kerchief. When they were sweating, the kerchief. The kerchief was used for many different functions, and you have to carry food in the kerchief. So he was carrying in his kerchief the par pechinaya. And it fell out. So she saw what fell out of the kerchief. So Amralei, so the Shivcha tells this Rebbe, twice. In the Sparzu, Chalug loisayich, Amachaya. So, like, it's a story that before, B'tenim Yikru V'aniyana. Now, they got all the answers from a Shivcha. That's the one gear, so it was one, from one Shivcha. And how important is that? In other words, the concept of Shimush Talmidei Chachamim, I'm saying in the bottom line is that what you learn by being around is so powerful that the Shivcha of Bei Rebbe, she knew halachas, and they accepted it from her. Now, in Bavli Rosh Hashanah Chavav Amid Beis, there are many other things which happen like this. So I want to read like this. There was one thing they didn't know, which is that Loihava Yad in the beginning, it's more or less on the 6 lines from top of Chavav Amid Beis in the Bavli. Loihava Yad Rabban and my Sirugin. They didn't know what Sirugin means. So Shamua la'amsa devei Rabbi. They didn't go there. They heard that a maid servant in the house of Rabbi, the chazisonhu rabbanon dahava ailu piske, that when she saw, they heard the story. She saw when the chachamim were entering intermittently. Amra lahu. So she told him ad masayatim lechasim sirugim. So listen to the Gemara in Bavli. So once they saw that this shifcha is using words of the Mishnah that they never knew, so they decided they're going to chaparain and resolve all of their words. Another story. Sorry. The chazis lahu gavra de kome vader parpechine amrele ad masiat mefazer chagul gleisecha. Let's go weiter. What's the meaning in the pasuk in Mishlei that silsila usiroy memeka? In Chassidus we explain the combing of the hair, and you comb your hair, you make yourself feel good. It means that every halach is one hair. Sha'arais mitasin is very significant. Limal yusa sar isha erva, but you give midus harachmim. In other words, if you're coming from a very high level of kedusha, hair is what we need. When we're coming from a Soiviv Kol Almim, so every halacha is called a hair, because where the Hashem put it in a mamala, you can learn about it, but you're connecting to something greater. So comb every halacha. But they didn't know what it means. So one time they heard a Amsa Devei Rebbe that she was telling to a person that was combing his hair. Combing your hair is not necessarily grooming yourself beyond what's needed. To be neat is not the most beautiful thing. Admasiyatem esalsal v'sorech. So she used the words misalsal beside. Now they know what that word means. Then there's a pasuk in Yeshayahu, v'tatose b'matata hashmeid, and that's connected to what's happening now in the Holy Land. That God with a broom will sweep out all of the garbage, but they didn't know what it means. So Yom Echad they heard the Amsa Devei Rebbe that was telling her friend Shkol Tatisa, and Tatisa meant a broom. So she said, take this broom and go work. V'tata base. Now they know what it means. And the final is, when it says in Tehillim, Hashlech al Hashem Yohavcha. Yohavcha means your burden. Put your burden on God. Why do you have to carry it? God is carrying you anyways. Put your burden on God. They didn't know what it means. And so Amar Rabbi Ber Bechana, here that he learned already from Ataya. Ataya is these Arab merchants. They knock everywhere. However they belong here. This is before Islam, just to clear. This is the Arab. This is Bnei Avraham Avinu somehow through Yishmael. That they were going, they saw Ataya. Havadorina tuna. He saw a Jew carrying a burden. He had Rachmanas on the Jew. He says, do me a favor, take your burden and put it on my camel. And he used the words Yahavcha. So anyways, the two things that we did not have in our Gemara is Silsila Srei Memeka, V'tatose b'matata hashmeid. What we have in the Yerushalmi that we don't have in the Babli is who should enter first, Shanim or Chachma, and the resolution is Shanim, and I think it's to make peace. And there's so much about this. There are actually in halacha, there's a concept that if the chacham is not such a great chacham, however, who's going to measure, I don't know. But if you have a Zayanuka, if you have a chacham that's rach b'shanim, but he's a big chacham, then he goes beyond shanim. So you leave open for machlokes. Now with this statement, make sure that someone will still get insulted.
I think the Jewish people establish it by Kiddush, where we honor the firstborn and on.
To make Kiddush?
No, but when we make Kiddush, right, and the kids are sipping a little bit of the wine, it goes by Shani.
It goes by Shani. But what happens if you have two guests and the two great people? So whatever. So you use this to say, I did what the Gemara said. You're greater, but